The Re-Animator franchise is one of the weirdest franchises I have ever seen. It follows the story of Dr. Herbert West, a mad scientist who goes all over the place trying to prove his theories correct. What are his theories? Well, that you can reanimate dead bodies. Yes, literally. Re-Animator, haha. And it turns into a gruesome, hilarious, and absolutely brutal, mad thing. There's no real way to describe this franchise other than just using a bunch of weird nouns just to, like, adjectives, I mean. Oh, same thing. I passed English, don't really care about that anymore. But yeah, let's just get into my ranking because I am very excited to talk about all these movies and get to my ranking at the end of the video. So, let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to SheaRants for Horror and Supreme. Today I'm talking about H.P. Lovecraft's, well, little Herbert West story. I don't know what the original thing was called. I'm not sure if it was called Re-Animator, but this is Re-Animator, and it's a cult classic horror comedy, and it's a lot of fun. The film follows the grotesque and increasingly insane experiment of Dr. Herbert West, a medical student who discovers a serum capable of reanimating dead tissue, and it leads to some interesting consequences. So, the film begins in Switzerland, where the brilliant but kinda insane Dr. Herbert West, who's played by Jeffrey Combs, in an amazing performance. Like, this is probably one of my favourite performances from him. I did like him in Would You Rather, I think is the name of the movie. I might review that at some point. But yeah, he's conducting experiments at the University of Zurich, I believe. I can't specifically remember. She was like a little sign at the front. But yeah, so he attempts to revive his professor, who has recently died, but the experiment goes AWOL when he just comes back to life and starts moving around weirdly before dying. And yeah, he is then accused of murdering him, but I guess, you know, it was all good, because suddenly he is in America, and, well, he's going to continue his study there. He rents a room with his fellow student, Dan, he's dating Megan, who is the daughter of the university's dean, so, you know, he's got full tuition for the rest of his, you know, days there. He doesn't have to pay, with money at least. But yeah, so West immediately clashes with the doctor there, Dr. Hill. He's a faculty member whose research was deemed outdated and plagiarized by West. He just overall thinks he's a twat, which, you know, I can agree with. I don't like him. But yeah, so West becomes obsessed with perfecting this, like, reagent, which is this phosphorus green serum. It reminds me of, like, the Substance. I'm sure that was somehow inspired by Re-Animator, because of course. But, like, looks a lot like the Substance, that's what I can compare it to. And it can bring the dead back to life. Dan, who is, you know, he's unaware of West's experiments up until he goes downstairs looking for his cat, and he finds his dead cat in the fridge. And then the dead cat is suddenly alive, and the dead cat dies again. Then they bring it back to life on a table while it's in bloody pieces. But yeah, so it's feral and violent now, so they have to kill it. Again. So yeah, Dan then becomes fascinated by the implications of the reagents, so, you know, they're cool, so they're just like, yeah, let's go to the morgue and smuggle some corpses to conduct more experiments on. So they sneak into the morgue to test the reagent on a, well, dead body. The experiment is initially a success, but when it turns violent, it attacks both Dan and West. It draws the attention of, well, our doctor here. He arrives at the scene and is brutally killed by the corpse before you know, it's subdued. And so they're desperate to save him, plus they need some fresh tissue, which will probably be better for this, so they use the reagent on him. And yeah, he comes back to life. But yeah, Dr. Hill then discovers his experiments, and he's kind of interested, so they do the things. But yeah, then he kidnaps Megan, and he brings her to his lab, where he plans to use her in an experiment. So Dan and West, they come up with a little rescue mission. So they go to the morgue, and he's reanimated several corpses. He's pretty much got his own little bodyguard system here of grotesque zombie dudes. So chaos ensues as, the corpses start to attack Dan and my boy Herbert over here. During the battle, Wes overloads his, zombies with, a load of reagent, and it causes it to just mutate and attack its fellow corpses. The morgue is then consumed by a load of chaos, and, each of the bodies just turn on each other, and it's just all over the place. Dan rescues Megan, but she's close to death. So he carries her to the hospital where he attempts to save her life, and he injects her with the reagent. And yeah, that's where the movie ends, but it kind of leaves it ambiguous, because, that there is a sequel. I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, so this movie definitely thrives on just how stupidly fun it is. It's got a great mix of horror and comedy and just a load of good gore. This movie shines with the gore and everything. The direction was really cool. It definitely embraced the absurdity of the premise while maintaining a good amount of tension that will keep you on edge. The film's pacing is pretty good, besides from a few scenes which were a bit too long for my liking. It's fine though. And Jeffrey Combs delivers a great performance as Herbert West. He perfectly embodies the character's just cold attachment to just anything, while at the same time just being absolutely mental. And yeah, he's obsessed, he's smart, he's charismatic, he's Herbert West. He's really just single-mindedly in pursuit of whatever his experiment could do, and that's really all you need to know about the guy. And yeah, he's just a great main character. He's sort of in between a villain and a hero. He's sort of like an anti-hero. And yeah, Dan is also another great character in the movie. He's pretty cool. He sort of grounds the story because he's more normal than my boy Herbert, but they're both doing this, so they're sort of as bad as each other. But yeah, the effects of the movie are a standout. It's got some great creative and visceral gore. It's really just got some, great effects, especially with, the zombies and everything. I gotta say, the cat didn't look very real, but it's a bloody cat being brought back to life in, an 80s movie, so I think I'll the script is pretty good as well, and I also love the score at the beginning. I know that it's pretty much just a Psycho score, but I don't care. It's bloody awesome. It's more upbeat than the OG Psycho score, and it's also just got some really cool visuals in there as well, specifically in the intro and along with some other parts in the movie as well. And I do think that the film just definitely is able to use this ridiculous premise to a T. It's great. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. What do you guys think about Re-Animator? Let me know in the comments below. If you have seen it though, if you haven't seen it, I do recommend watching the movie. It is a load of fun. But yeah, I give the movie an 8 out of 10. It's a load of fun. It's a good little 80s horror comedy, dark comedy. Very dark comedy, if you know what I mean. The humor in this movie isn't exactly haha, that's a joke. It's more oh, that just happened. So Bride of Re-Animator is the sequel to the cult classic Re-Animator, and it's directed by Brian Usner, and it continues the grotesque and kind of darkly comedic story of Herbert West, aka my boy Jeffrey Combs, and Dan Kane, he's played by Bruce Abbott once again, as they dive deeper into their unethical, weird, and kind of terrifying experiments. This time, their obsession leads them to attempting to create new life, which, doesn't go very well. The film begins 8 months after the original, where Dr. Herbert West and Dr. Dan Kane are now serving as medics in the Civil War in a country in South America. And West continues his experiments, testing, his reagent on different soldiers, mainly the dead ones. And Dan is, he's a normal one, so he's this is kind of weird, bro, we shouldn't be doing this, it's kind of unethical. But, it stands, so he comes around. Then an explosion happens, and they realise this probably isn't the best place to be while we're doing our experiments. So they go back to Miss Catholic University in Arkham. Once they're there, they resume their experiments in the basement of their house, by the way, I love the houses in this movie. They're so gothic and creepy and cool. It's really interesting and different from the first movie. I like it. And yeah, so West actually reveals that he nicked Megan's heart, which, if you don't know who Megan is, it's Dan's ex-fiancée who died in the first movie. So yeah, he's got her heart, which he is going to use to create a bride for Dan, which is going to be amazing, I'm sure. Meanwhile, though, Dr. Graves, who is working at the Miskatonic Hospital as well, becomes fascinated by West's reagent after he finds some at the crime scenes of, the first movie. And after he discovers a lot of West's research, he begins to, inject a few different things with it. He begins with a bat, then a decapitated head of Dr. Hill from the first movie, yeah. It's weird. And I really don't understand this dude, to be fair. Like, once, you see what it does, I wouldn't really use it that much, because I'd save that. I wouldn't shove it into a decapitated head. He probably couldn't do much, but it's Dr. Hill, so he does a lot of things, to be fair. But yeah, so he comes back to life, and Hill once again becomes a force for evil, because, well, that's just who he is. And he uses, this telepathic thing in his mind to control all the other reanimated corpses and help him go attack West. So, as West is working on assembling the bride, Dan grows increasingly attached to another young woman who he met. And, well, as usual, they get it on. And then she's like, wait a minute, you're working with this guy to bring back the dead. That's kind of creepy, bro. I'ma just leave. But before she leaves, they finally complete the bride, and it is a grotesque amalgamation of body parts harvested from different corpses, and of course Meg's heart. But they're missing a head, so where did they get the head from? Oh, but of course, a dying cancer patient in the hospital. I mean, where else are you going to find a perfectly good head? The answer just comes out of nowhere. But yeah, so they successfully create the bride, and it comes to life in a very cool display of practical effects. I love the effects in these movies. Sure, these movies aren't the best. They aren't anywhere near good. Maybe the first one, but this one isn't anywhere near good, but it's goofy as all hell, and the effects are amazing, so I've got to give them props where props are due. Give it props. Practical effects, yeah. But yeah, so, the bride is alive at last. And she becomes close with Dan because, of course, it's Megan's heart, so it kind of feels a little bond to him. And she's like, he made me. And then Dan's just like, yeah, I did. But yeah, so the final act spirals into complete madness as Dr. Hill and his army of reanimated corpses storm West and Kane's laboratory. And a brutal battle ensues where all the corpses fight, West and Kane, and the bride's just off doing her own thing. Francesca becomes entangled in all the randomness, it's like the ending of the first movie. And the bride dies, and so does everyone else, in a tragic thing where, the building completely falls down on all of them, supposedly killing West again, but I mean, we all know there's a third one. Am I gonna talk about it? Sadly, yes. I really don't want to talk about the third one, to be fair. I really hate it, but it does show Hill's head alive again, and it shows that Kane and Francesca both alive, but that storyline goes utterly nowhere. I would prefer them continue that rather than just going some random place with the third movie, where they filmed it in, a Valencian prison. Sure, when I lived in Spain, I could have probably gone and visited the filming location for that movie, but, will I really want to visit the filming location for Beyond Re-Animator? Probably not. But yeah, so Bride of Re-Animator, it definitely contains the charm of the first movie, while also carving out its own little thing in this franchise. It's more comedic and campy than the first movie, but the effects are so good. It's able to just show so many cool effects, from this little hand thing, to Hill, to all the corpses, to the bride herself, which is absolutely amazingly done. Like, the amount of different effects people that worked on this movie, I think the effects list at the beginning in the opening credits goes on longer than most of the other parts of the opening credits. Yeah, like, the special effects are definitely the highlight. It showcases some really innovative and grotesque practical effects. It's got some great techniques. And, yeah, Jeffrey Combs, once again, he delivers a stand-up performance as West. He leans it even further into the character's just absolute idiocy and brilliance. And yes, I think he is an idiot because, well, I mean, he's trying to mess with the dead. I wouldn't do that, you know? I have a brain, which I'd probably lose if I was around West, because he'd probably, one, murder me for parts, or two, trick me into being his lackey, and then I'd probably die or something. But yeah, you know, the film definitely can feel uneven at times, though. The plot occasionally just veers into absolute stupidity, which I'll admit I enjoyed, you know. I like a good dumb movie, but at some points you want to ask yourself, is it a bit too much? And the love story between Dan, the bride, the other chick in this movie, it was a bit janky for me. Like, I didn't need all of that. Firstly, Dan, my man, why do you want to get jiggy with a dead body, if you know what I mean? A bit weird, mate. Thankfully, he basically shuts it down immediately when he's like, wait a minute, this is like a dead corpse and stuff. That's a bit weird. And I'm glad that, you know, he got his happy ending in this movie, but I would have liked to see him come back for the third one, even though it took bloody years for the third one, but just come back, man. Please. It would have been so much better than what we actually got with the third movie, which I will be reviewing at some point soon, so look out for that. But ultimately, this movie adds like a layer of dark humor that I think fans of the first movie will enjoy, and it's got some great moments, along with amazing practical effects that definitely bring it up a lot for me, just because the story and the movie itself are not the best, but the effects is what you really want with Re-Animator. You want the gore, you want the violence, you want the weird, goofy-ass experiments. Beyond Re-Animator is the third and final installment in the Re-Animator franchise. It picks up years after the events of Bride of Re-Animator, and the film sees Wes imprisoned, but he is still pursuing his grotesque experiments. He's now focused on separating the soul from the body and trying to maintain consciousness within the reanimated corpses. The movie blends some gruesome body horror, dark comedy, and exactly what you expect with Re-Animator. So the film opens with a flashback where a young boy named Howard Phillips witnesses his sister being killed by a reanimated corpse. This is basically directly after Dr. Herbert West's little stint in Bride of Re-Animator, where he pretty much ends with like reanimated corpses going all over the place, completely messing up everything and the house collapsing. And yeah, West is arrested and he's sent to prison, and while Howard grows up determined to understand what happened that night, well, he'll sure be able to understand it soon. Because 17 years later, Dr. Herbert West is now an inmate in a maximum security prison. He is serving time for his unethical experiments, and even behind bars, he continues his work in secret. He uses rats as test subjects, and he has discovered a new nanoplasmic energy, which he believes is the essence of the soul, which he can use to maintain the mind inside of the reanimated corpses by adding a little smidgen of this nanoplasmic technology inside of them. And I think that's kind of cool, you know. If this existed in real life, that would definitely be sold for thousands, if not millions. But yeah, Howard Phillips is now a young doctor, and he secures a position at the prison to work as a new medical officer. He's fascinated by West's research, since when he was younger, right as West was being arrested, he sort of just looked down, and there was a glowing vial of the reagents, so Howard picked it up and he saved it for him all these years later. But yeah, so with West, they become allies, and he provides access to the resources that West needs to continue his experiments. Howard shares West's belief that the reagent can be used to revolutionize medicine, but he is also blind to the ethical implications, similar to a certain guy named Dan. I'm looking at you, Dan. Imagine if anyone named Dan is watching this video and they're just like, me? Me? What did I do? But yeah, so they use prison inmates as unwilling test subjects, even though, you know, that's kind of messed up. But then the warden comes down because, well, of course he does. But this is after he murders Howie's girlfriend, because pretty much this reporter named Jennifer has been going around the prison trying to tell a story on it. But the warden is pretty much this absolute dickhead, so he pretty much assaults her, which leads to her death, and Howie is absolutely devastated, so they strap Brando, which is the warden, up to this table, and they shock nanoplasmic energy out of him, which also kills him. And so they put it inside of his girlfriend, and she is suddenly back to life, but she's got a bit of a split personality due to Brando being this abrasive, douchey guy, and her being, you know, a normal person. So she's not exactly happy with being alive again. Well, she is, because she's with Howie, but then at the same time she's sort of losing her mind. But yeah, they then put some rat reagent into the warden, and the warden comes back as this weird little rat dude, and he's climbing and jumping all over the place, acting like an utter buffoon, but you know, what do you expect, it's Re-Animator. And yeah, after a violent confrontation with a lot of the prisoners, the prison descends into utter chaos, as the reanimated corpses of the inmates and staff turn on each other. And West's experiments have created yet another uncontrollable epidemic of undead dudes. Like, I was about to say undead violent creatures, but I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, Hal begins to realise how horrifying everything is and how evil West is. But meanwhile, he's just, you know, doing his usual. He is coldly focused on his research. He really doesn't care about the cons around him. He just cares about, you know, all the opportunities to further refine his theories, research, and all the usual jazz. You know, I don't think where he was planning on going with this, because, like, imagine if he was able to do it in the prison without Howie's help and without any of this going wrong. How would he exactly get all this research to people to, like, help others, or, like, would he publish this, and would they give him, like, a pardon to get out of prison or something? I don't know. But yeah, the film ends with Howie killing Jennifer, because pretty much she's completely lost her mind at this point, and she just wants to die. So he starts slitting her throat, but that isn't enough for some reason, so he entirely decapitates her. And as he's grieving over her dead head, West just walks over, grabs his car, and just leaves. Like, you know, West is a cold guy. I would not want to be mates with him. Shout out to Dan. But yeah, so beyond Re-Animator, it takes the franchise into new territory by replacing Herbert West in a claustrophobic environment. Instead of, you know, the houses, we're in a goddamn prison. And while this setting provides some fresh ideas, it is also limited because, you know, it's kind of boring. It doesn't really feel as gothic and memorable as the original two films. And the film's lower budget is even more evident because they literally just filmed this thing in a Spanish prison and used mainly Spanish actors. So this doesn't sound very much like Massachusetts, guys. It sounds more like, Spain. As someone who lived in Spain for like 5 years, I was like, wait, these guys sound kind of familiar. But yeah, so, I mean, I do enjoy this movie, even though it's not the best. You know, it's still got the same dark humour and just utter stupidity of the previous two, and it is able to just continue the weirdness of the last two. It's still got some really good effects, and the gore is plentiful, with some moments of really grotesque, like, humour and just grotesque, like, moments in the movie. But the film's budget is so obvious when this is just so weird. Like, it literally includes a severed penis, gaining life, and battling a rat at the end of the movie. Yes. Really. And yes, some of the effects lean more towards the absurdity than the horror. Like, at one point, one of the guys grabs the reagent, sticks it inside of him, and starts having, like he starts getting high from sticking the reagent in him, because he's like, oh, that's the good shit. He shoves it inside of him, and he's just like... Yeah, it's really not the best movie, but it's definitely okay. You know, it's not the worst that I've seen. But once again, it's not good. But then again, I don't specifically think that any of these movies are bad. This whole franchise is a whole thing in itself. And hopefully one day I'll be able to watch the Italian film and add it to my ranking. But until then, thank you for watching this video. I give this film like a 5 out of 10. As I said, it is not bad. It is just really, really mediocre. And those were the reviews, but what are the rankings? Well, beginning it in last place, we have Beyond Re-Animator. This film is really not the best. It's just... really boring at times, but also it's just not anywhere near the quality of the first two. It feels oddly goofy and just cheap at times as well. Like, the budget is very obvious, and I know that some films are low budget, but some are able to work with it and embrace the stupidity. This one just sadly isn't able to, and that is where it falls flat for me. Moving on from there, I have Bride of Re-Animator. This movie really isn't the best either, but it is such a step up from the last movie in this franchise that I just can't help but love it. It is so goofy and so weird and so creepy and so weird. I've said weird like 5 times this video already, but like, oh my god, this movie is so odd. Like, it's got like romance, gore, horror, comedy all in one. And it's got a kick-ass score as well that I just can't help but love it. But yeah, ultimately, my number one movie in this franchise is, of course, the original Re-Animator. It's such a fun movie to watch, and it's just so cool seeing all these amazing effects and amazing actors come together to create this really, really underrated movie. It's got some great effects, some great gore, some great body horror. Like, I feel that's one of the things which is really underlooked with this franchise. The effects and the body horror is such a good element of all of these movies that I feel is just not very talked upon that much, and I just really wish that a lot of people really just cared about it more. Just because it is so fun having to watch all these movies again. Like, sure, none of them are exactly the best, but none of them are bad. Like, I haven't seen the Italian one, okay, I don't know if that's bad, but like, I would still really like to see that one, and I'd like to see where it compares to these other ones, because it is a different adaptation. It's not connected to these. I'm sure it's like an adaptation of the first movie, probably. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. What do you guys think about these movies? Like, where do they rank for you? Like, have you seen them all? Do you even know there's a third one? Do you even know what the second one or the first one is even about? Like, I know these aren't exactly the most popular movies out there, but I do really enjoy them a lot. Like, I love Jeffrey Combs' performance in all of them. He's such a good actor. And yeah, that's pretty much it. As I said, let me know your ranking in the comments below. But until next time, bye-bye.